of the aurora borealis, a renaissance of exploration, the new age of discovery, the romantic frontier. To Antarctica expedition. I will also be bringing my astro.
Alright, we are live March 4th, 2024. This is Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms Antarctic Expedition, which has an entirely different vibe than Storm Antarctica. Alright, I just sent out live stream notifications, so if you're a member of Patreon or IPS.monster or InfinitePlaneSociety.com, you should have gotten the notifications about 10 minutes ago. Joined here by Diana South from DLive, AJ206737, Ready or Not 31 says, let's break it down. Yeah, we're going to break it entirely. There's a space rock, a planet killer, labeled Auto Hoax 2024 on its way to the world stage as we speak, and it's going to hit sometime this year. It's going to hit before Apophis 99942. But yes, it's a planet killer. We have Adaptivia from Twitch, Jungle Jim from YouTube, Oswaldo, MultiC0, and let's see. Okay, great. We have two YouTube channels on. The main one, InfinitePlaneSociety.com, is monetized, which means we're taking calls. Open phones for open minds. Open phones for skeptical minds for the most part. We're trying to elevate our conversation here, and it means a lot of debate, I'm sure. But it also means we're not going to platform ideas that are designed to sabotage free speech, sabotage the free exchange of ideas. It's kind of a foot bullet. You're not fighting for free speech when you take the bait and allow them to censor you. So we're just going to play it smart with this particular channel, but if we have to get into some bannable territory, we have the backup. No big deal. Joined by Clockwork 113, Demetria 101. Okay, great. Yeah, we're about 10 minutes early, but I figured let's just start. Phone numbers on the screen now. 505-349-0420. If you have any concerns, complaints, or constructive commentary, questions, intel, feel free to call in. This is recent. This is from yesterday. NASA's channel on X reported this. Separation confirmed. Crew 8 is now cruising to its destination, where they will conduct research to benefit humanity. Projects include studying how to improve human health in space, docking for 3 a.m. So we're watching this docking, and there's a couple of things I want to note here. A lot of the people in the comment section are noticing the bubbles. And if you didn't know, there's bubbles in space. And if you don't agree with that, you're just a flat earther. It looks like a blizzard. Now, they'll say it's something else. They'll say it's space dust, it's something. They have an explanation. But what I'm pointing out here is the lighting. Why does it disappear into the darkness when it's just a few dozen feet away? That's light loss. That's light diffusion. That's the indicator that it's underwater. The bubbles may not be bubbles. It may be some debris that they put there, but it certainly moves like it's underwater. But again, their cognitive dissonance will allow them to bypass that. However, the lighting is clearly consistent, very consistent, with night dives. If you look at night dive footage, the quality of light is a big thing, a big indicator, a big tell. In fact, I have in a video a compilation of spacewalks where I'm going to make the case here that you can determine that it's underwater simply by the lighting, since the bubbles weren't enough. Now let's move on here. Look at some of the comments. Nice try, NASA, says Cookie Inspector. Almost as cool as this. Fake Stanley Kubrick video. Come on. Stanley Kubrick, as truthers will say, he faked the moon landing. He didn't just fake the moon landing. Yeah, maybe that's among his list of credit. His IMDb would say faked the moon landing, but he also faked the JFK assassination. He directed 9/11. And largely is responsible for the 2020s major theatrical production that we all lived through. A lot of this stuff was not just Kubrick. We can list off the meta scripters involved, James Cameron, Thomas Clancy. There are so many, but Kubrick is certainly central to a lot of these psyops, and so it would be to miss the point to say that he helped them to fake the moon landing and that he was hinting at it in The Shining. No, he wasn't hinting at it in The Shining. He wasn't saying, "Oh, look what I did. I feel bad about it." That's what truthers think. Like he's winking, like he's one of us. He's trying to tell the truth because he felt bad about deceiving the world. No, not at all. Because the movie The Shining actually contains copious predictive programming for 9/11 itself. And it's foreshadowed in a number of ways: the dying twins, the twin elevators opening, the blood pouring out. There are so many different ways that they foreshadow 9/11. Interestingly, there's a channel on Twitter that I highly recommend. It's Crypto Cubrology. Crypto Cubrology. And he's been doing a lot of this predictive programming breakdown, specifically looking at deconstructing the work of Kubrick. His channel bio says, a useful methodology for deconstructing cinema, history, and synchronicity. Quote, some of the most schizo-ass you'll ever see. Now, this is very interesting stuff. And he really does go beyond just Kubrick, but it really does all tie to this stuff. And why is that? Because Stanley Kubrick isn't someone who was hired by the government because he was good at movies. Kubrick's part of a department. You might even think of it as a Kubrick department. The space program was never about sending you to space. It was always about mind control, worldview, warfare. And that's where you would place him. Interestingly enough, before the JFK assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald was working at Riley Coffee. And all of his coworkers were sought after following the assassination. Hey, let's get some info on this guy who shot the president. They were gone because they went to go work for NASA. Boeing, NASA, I mean, they were basically all went over there. I'm like, wait, they're all working at this coffee shop. They all go to NASA. Oswald, who was working there, in a letter to his girlfriend, said something about going to work for NASA. And I'm suggesting that he did. But he just didn't go to the fake space department. He went to the fake assassination department. And who shot JFK? Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick. He directed the Zapruder film. Okay, Travis Cloud says, I think there's a perfectly good scientific explanation for that. If you're talking about the bubbles in space and the lighting disappearing and diffusing, yeah, it's movie magic. And you cannot have an honest debate with someone about space travel if they're not willing to include the possibility of the evidence being corrupted by Photoshop, video editing, manipulation. That they don't even rule that in. It's naive. And they'll say, oh, your argument that it's video is an argument from incredulity because you can't believe it's real. It's like, no, I'm visually literate. I'm informed. I can edit video. I've done this for years, and it just doesn't fool me. And this idea that we're just being incredulous is kind of gaslighting, but it's also coming from people who don't know the difference between real and fake. And I would also add, it's pointless to debate with people who believe the news in general. Forget the shape of the world. I'm not interested anyway in people who believe it's flat. I'm interested in the agnostics out there, those who have reached a healthy level of agnosticism about their worldview in general based on what we've been given. But you can't get anywhere with someone who thinks it's merely about shape and they believe everything else because it was never about shape. It's always been a worldview question, which is much more significant. But the fact that it is obviously fake and phony is being called out by a lot of people. Maga Kaga says, it takes 9 boosters to believe this is real. Interesting Stuff says, what's all the stuff flying around? It looks like it's actually being filmed underwater. I'm waiting for someone to come along and try to gaslight. Why are there bubbles in space? Maybe it's underwater. My bubbles in space video, where I went to the city council and I spoke about bubbles in space and the ISS being a hoax, a movie, it got more than 1 million hits in the last few months for some reason. Next time I go to speak at the city council meetings, and I'll be doing many of these once we get the ball rolling here, I will wear a shirt that says IPS. I will have a QR code because it's 1 million hits and it doesn't return back to us, although I'm happy for it to be out there. You owe the taxpayers a refund and the world an apology, says Mac Burton. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, continuing here. We're going through comments again. This is in a water tank. You can see the bubbles. NASA's not even trying anymore. They never were. It's not like, look, some truthers are just so full of hopium. They have Stockholm syndrome so bad. They're like, oh, the reason why NASA is screwing up is because they're winking at us, the smart ones who can see through it. It's a D class, and they can't tell us, but they can show us. I mean, it's just like, it's sad. In a way, it's sad. It's like, no, that's not the case. If you look back, they have been terrible at this from the get-go. It's always been terrible. It's been terrible since the 60s. And, interestingly enough, the simulation has been indistinguishable from the real thing since the 60s, from the control room. The people in the control room have no inkling about what's going on. But my point of it is, their graphics, their special effects have always been terrible. They didn't just suddenly start being bad at it. They just didn't suddenly stop caring. And yeah, they're getting 70 some million dollars a day. Thank you, multi-seater Zero Dagger. We here at the IPS appreciate the support. The think tank is prepared right now to metastasize. We have a great year ahead of us. As the world gets more chaotic, as they ramp up the drama, this is going to be the most stable, calmest oasis out there. By the way, today there was unanimous agreement, Supreme Court 9-0. Trump is not going to be pulled from the Colorado ballot. You know how mad that's going to make the left? Like, what are they going to do now? And we're in March, March 4th. And March is always when they kick off a lot of the marches. It's all about the weather. And also, I think actually it's got some other meanings to it too. The timing of these things, like it's like, wow, just in time for for example, May Day, major communist holiday. But that's the high point on the occult witchcraft calendar. And on May Day, Maypole, symbol of the earth god, you'll have all these politicos marching around that giant obelisk in DC. Not a coincidence. Matrix batteries just being activated, being tapped. Human Action says, are those bubbles? They seem to be bubbles. Why the bubbles? Bubbles. Amazing. All these flat earthers with their incredulity, right? These are just regular people wondering why there are bubbles in space. And if you don't wonder, or if you're not curious about bubbles in space, it's because you haven't watched. If you watched any of this footage, you would have to somehow work it out in your head. How does this make sense? Does it make sense? There were bubbles all around Starman, which I think, again, there's a couple of explanations here. It's like, are they filming it in the pool? Highly likely. It's the lighting that gives it away, but not all of it. There are some parts of it which may not necessarily be underwater. I mean, obviously, the interior shots of the ISS are shot on a movie set, similar to what they used in the movie Inception and a few other movies. You just have to look at the behind the scenes, the movie magic stuff to understand NASA. And NASA's movie magic is antiquated. It's sad. And when I watched the new ISS movie, I was like, look, there's not one loose hair. Why is that? They're usually so happy to show off their hair because it proves they're in space. And they have these women hanging upside down with their hair standing up, or too much hairspray, so it's standing up stiffly and weirdly. So I watched this movie, and the female astronauts have their hair tied down, not one loose hair. And that's, again, my contention here is that if they were to outdo the ISS in the movie ISS, it would make the ISS look bad by comparison, and it might be useful ammunition for people like us to say, hey, why does the movie version of the real thing look realer than the real thing? You see, it doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be that way. Lean Dion says, movie stars in scuba class. Well, you can't be a NASA astronaut without being a scuba diver first. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab. That's what they call the place. And they don't have flippers in these spacesuits, so they have scuba divers all around maneuvering them. And there have been many instances of people seeing scuba divers in space. I saw a squid in space. I can find the video. Maybe I'll put it in my notes here. I saw a squid. Now, a couple of years ago, Elon Musk sent baby squids to space, supposedly. Like they sent the genetically modified mice. But I remember they were sending these baby squids to space, and later in that year, this video came up where this UFO watcher. See, you have a lot of these people who think the space station's real. They watch the footage, and when they see bubbles, they say it's the mothership, it's aliens. So they kind of do damage control for NASA with their desire to believe that any anomaly is from UFOs. So they're always like, oh, NASA's secretly up there flying with UFOs. Well, there was a video where this space believer was convinced that he saw a dragon in space. And it did from the back, it looked like a small bat in the background, and the way it moved, it looked like it was flapping wings. Well, if a dragon is in space, it wouldn't be flapping its wings. It wouldn't do anything. There's no, it's just, sorry, it's a vacuum. So that doesn't make sense. But I looked at it very closely and I thought, well, maybe it's a scuba diver in the background. One of these scuba divers that maneuver these astronauts around. But the more I looked at it, I was like, you know what? That looks exactly like an octopus or squid. Probably an octopus, but whatever it was moving like an octopus, not a dragon. But it doesn't make sense to have an octopus in space, but we know they film in swimming pools. So I don't know. Maybe they have squids in fake space. We need to drain the pool. All right, let's move on. More comments here. We're looking at people responding to NASA's, SpaceX's latest presentation. Space agencies are the biggest money laundering operations. Money laundering, Yeah, I saw this meme, or maybe it was a photo from deep space. It was a black hole, but it had money going into it. And it had like NASA. But anyway, space agencies are the biggest money laundering operations, again, $78 million a day, next to banking. I don't find that difficult to believe. And where is the money going? I don't think they're spending it on lavish lifestyles. I think the money's going somewhere. Like maybe it's not going to outer space, but maybe it's going to deep space. Maybe deep space is underground infrastructure. Maybe they're building Mars bases as we speak. They already have Mars simulation cities. They already have these. They're already recruiting people to prepare for Mars, which is basically solitary confinement or living in a cell. It's basically a gulag. They're introducing space communism as the ideal, but you get there, it's a bait and switch, and you're basically going to be living in isolation at an outpost on some remote area where you can't even exit. You're on life support all the time. But they've sold it as progress. Okay, continuing. Chris Maria Molman says, I never looked at NASA until I did, and I can't believe people fall for this nonsense. Billions of dollars spent and nothing to show for it but CGI. One big money laundering machine. Yeah, you know what? My way of describing it would be it's part of the New World Order religion. The New World Order religion isn't coming. They're not trying to get us all to embrace some figure that we're all going to find palatable because it's not how it works. We're too divided. We already have the one world religion. It's the model that we've been given, and outer space is the new heaven. And the whole purpose of it really is just getting everybody into the same simulated reality. But it's definitely a money laundering operation, but it's really no different than religions of the past with its false promises of, salvation. We call Elon Musk Pope Elon for a couple of reasons. The space agencies are really part of the high priesthood, the elevated priesthood. And the symbol of salvation from the world and resurrection has traditionally been the obelisk. The rocket, named after these various dead sun gods, invariably, is always just another obelisk. And it takes you where? To heaven. To space. Continuing, soon, like Bill Gates, NASA will turn off post comments. When that happens, suspicions will be confirmed. They already did on YouTube. On YouTube, if you go on to any of their cartoons, we're talking about the Church of Nasatology's cartoons of the spaceships, they will block your comments. We used to like gang up and do chat raids. Hundreds of us would flood into these NASA live streams and say it's fake. Why does it look like this? Bubbles in space. And they blocked it. Like we kind of broke that. Same thing with SpaceX launches. We used to go and spam the comments section right before the launches. And one day they scrapped the launch, but they pulled those comment sections down. All right, moving on. Grateful Grace says, who knew space had lightning bugs? Water bubbles everywhere. And I was comparing underwater night dive footage to NASA footage. And I was looking at the way the bubbles were scattering off the back of a manta ray at the bottom of a lake. And it looked very similar to the way the space station has these bubbles flying off. Someone else says lies. NASA's a bunch of scammers. Someone here says Earth is flat. One giant lie for all mankind. Could it be any more fake? I'm not seeing a lot of people defending it. Okay, continuing. No way. Darth Jawa says, get ready for the biggest joint lawsuit in history. The American people are done with this nonsense. It would be nice if a lot of people would gang up and do a class action lawsuit against NASA, but it's not going to happen. Just like the chemtrailers will never get together and sue the airlines. There's just something complacent about truthers today that makes them incapacitated when it comes to taking action. All they can do is point it out. Does the person running the NASA Twitter, asks 13 Lou, does the person running NASA Twitter know about the lies, or are they just another slave? I would say they don't know. The people who defend the globe, the gloobers, the glurfs, they don't know. They're just totally self-righteous about it. Again, we're just looking at separation confirmed, Crew 8 now cruising to its destination, and you have this separation being recorded here, the docking process, and a bunch of bubbles fly out everywhere. But what really stands out to me, aside from the bubbles, which again, the people who believe this is real will conveniently ignore, is it disappears when it's 30 feet away because it's underwater and the light gets diffused. Light loss is the term in photography. Light loss debunks the space station. Multi-Zero Dagger says, I wonder what Elon will do with the people who have claustrophobia. Right. Well, when you look at the TV show Space Cadets, it was a 10-episode series, a hoax where they convinced people they were in space. They didn't just let anybody go. They didn't let anybody go if they were too smart, if they were too inhibited or introspective. They wanted people who were without any real-life experience and just liked to be the center of attention and were people pleasers with no inhibitions. And that's how they were able to fool them into thinking they were in space. And I kind of think that when they select the 1,000,000 people to go to the fake Mars base under China, they're all going to be obviously, heavily mediated, boosted, insulated. They're not going to be in any form of like critical thinking frame of mind. Of course, they're going to be brainwashed. It's like the I Am Temple back in the late 80s when all their members went into a bunker because they thought China and Russia were going to nuke us. They went into that bunker together and it became this perfect echo chamber. And even though the world wasn't nuked, they just said, we blocked it. Our prayers stopped it. We saved the world. So even though they gave up their life savings to move into a bunker for a little while, they came out of it feeling like saviors and heroes. And I think they'll be able to find cult brainwashees. And it won't just be people that are volunteering. They're going to pay. Rich brainwashees are going to pay for this immersive illusion, this alternate reality game. And half the people there will know. most of the people will know it's fake. And their job will be to keep the people who don't know it's fake from forming conspiracy theories or having any kind of doubts. And when they do have doubts, they'll probably say this person's got some kind of sickness and they'll send him back. Who knows what they'll do? Maybe they'll kill them. Have you heard of Astrocrete? I mean, talk about sustainability. You don't waste anything. Astrocrete is a building material, concrete, that scientists have said that they can use blood as a binder, along with extraterrestrial dust. Lunar, Mars, regolith, human blood, proteins can form a cement. Cosmic concrete from space dust. So if you don't believe you're on Mars, they might be able to convince people that you're better off just being put into the chipper and then spat out. And blood and soil, I think that's also part of it. The concept of blood and soil, of the people being connected to the land. Well, you get the new arrivals on Mars or on the moon, and the first generation there, the brainwashies who are imported, they will all donate their blood. They'll give blood to build the infrastructure above. And their children will then look at this as, our parents, our forefathers, they bled for this land. And so it really creates this bond, kind of a trauma bond in a way, but I think that's a big part of it as well. Wait until NASA starts taking blood donations so you can have it made into bricks, like moon bricks. Donate blood for moon bricks. And they just load up a rocket with blood, a big old blood rocket, and hopefully it doesn't explode when it's launching up there. All right, let's see here. Lean Dion says the light loss diffusion thing is brilliant. Yeah, you know what? That is a death blow to the ISS. And I ran this by Fight the Flat Earth, and he was like, present me all of your evidence. And I'm like, maybe, but not right away. I'm gathering as much as I can, and I'm going back because their graphics have been terrible from the beginning. They were really obvious about it in the early days, and just because they improve the graphics and it looks better and better as they go doesn't mean that they can use that as an arguing point without looking at the past stuff. It's a house of cards. The fact that we can see astronauts dangling from bungee cords, like just from 15 years ago, we can never let that go. That alone negates everything that follows. Fake moon landing means fake space station, means fake everything else. It's a house of cards. P. Troopa says, 25 minutes behind. Anything I miss? Oh, we were talking about space squids and bubbles in space. Light loss. Okay, continuing here. Okay, Ozzy Osbourne. So Ozzy Osbourne here. Here he is with short hair. I mean, this is a strange little clip. But recently, he was in the news because he denied Ye West the right to use a sample from Iron Man. So Ye used Iron Man in a song. He was going to perform with it. So he plays an intro, and then he comes out in his Jason Voorhees mask or whatever he's doing. Well, the Osbournes were mad about it, and they said because they're Jewish and he's an anti-Semite, they can't allow him to use their music. Well, this just came out. Ozzy Osbourne was once asked, and here he is with a buzz cut, who do you think has influenced your stage show performances the most? And who do you think Ozzy Osbourne was most influenced by?
Influence your stage shows the most?
Me?
Where did you get your ideas from? From working?
He's like, me? Yeah, you're the one being interviewed, Ozzy. But this is good. Listen to this.
In a mortuary when you were 15?
Adolf Hitler.
What do you mean by that, Ozzy?
Adolf Hitler had a charisma in a bad way. And I kind of admired him. He was a freak, he was a lunatic. But he had something about him, I know it was all bad what he did. It was terrible what that guy did. He killed all these people and whatever. But it was like,
But he was so charming. This is insane. This is like commenting on how charming Ted Bundy was. It's like, yeah, he had a great personality, a lot of charisma. But regardless, this is Ozzy saying that Hitler influenced his stage performance, and yet he's denying Ye the right to use Iron Man.
But it was like, he had something about him, And I admired him, not for what he was, but for people. And I suddenly stopped to myself, hey man, if somebody put that in the positive way, for the good of mankind, and that's all I mean, whatever anybody says about me, I may be the biggest lunatic that you've ever met in your...
Alright, anyway. G33 says, Tim, your Scorpio intro last night was great. Listen on the replay. In my opinion, the best with esoteric flow. Pun intended, that's why I listen. Esoteric philosophy. Oh yeah, last night we were talking about Griselda. And I've been listening to the audiobook Labyrinths by Jorge Borge, and it's pretty interesting. Again, it has to do with time and a concept of time that, and we've been discussing this as well, because, I mean, it sounds crazy, I'm sure, or who, I don't really know how, I wouldn't know if crazy is the word, but like, I think it makes sense to me anyway, that the universe doesn't actually exist until it's experienced. And that's kind of where these writings go in Labyrinths. So I'm watching this movie Griselda, and one of the characters has that book in his car. And with everything on Netflix, if they show something, I tend to look it up. So I looked up this book. But this character is later, he's out in the desert, in the Mojave, tripping on peyote, and he's got a Scorpio on his hand, and he's got a watch. And he's talking about time not being linear, but being a circle, and how few people can break that cycle. And when you get into the symbolism of the tarot, the scorpion is one of the associations with the death card, and the Scorpio sign is associated with death, which has to do with fall, the reaper, the sickle. But I've always found it really interesting, the phonetic uh, uh, similarities between cycle, circle, sickle in this context, because we're talking about the circle of time. And this was reiterated by the symbol of the watch on his wrist. But again, in the tarot concept, death isn't the end, but it's the end of a stage, which then begins the next stage, the next year, the next, after a harvest. It's not the end. It's a period of time, and then it begins again. And when you look at the scorpion itself, often a symbol of death, it's also a symbol of rebirth because of the way it sheds its exoskeleton. And it's like the exoskeleton could be symbolic of aspects of the self that are perhaps inauthentic, perhaps things that you shed as you grow as a person, these micro deaths or even bigger deaths of the self. So it's a symbol of transformation. Very interesting scene in the movie, in the series, which I haven't finished yet. But I also think the series is really about sexism. This Griselda is about a female mob boss, this godmother, and it's about sexism in the crime world, sexism in the FBI. And I think it's also preparing people for President Kamala. Sorry, but that's just where it's going. But the scorpion itself also has the stinger, which is very much kind of like a sickle. I mean, it wasn't mine, but I had a roommate at one point that had emperor scorpions, and there was just something really disturbing about it because one of them, it had like 6 babies on its back, like little miniature scorpions, and they were kind of cute in a weird way. But then one day, for no reason, have you ever seen a scorpion's mouth? It's got like these jaws that are sideways and then this vertical. So it's like 2 mouths. It's like a wood chipper. And one day it just begins grabbing the babies off its back, one after another, feeding them into the wood chipper of its mouth. Just baby after baby, it just eats them all. And I was just kind of repulsed by scorpions ever since. I would also say avoid Scorpios. Pancho Lefty has joined us, says, all I know about peyote I learned from The Sopranos. Well, the peyote taking character was sort of a philosopher, but his comments on time and the reference to that book was kind of an interesting rabbit trail to go down. Alright, moving on. Cubstar has also been commenting on that video of Crew 8 and the separation. He says, some of those things look like they're swimming in water. They curve and zoom around. No straight trajectories. It's crazy what they can get away with. I find this heartening, though. Interesting stuff said. What's all the stuff flying around? It's almost like this is actually being filmed underwater. Matthew Lopez says, those are bubbles in a pool of water, LMAO. They're just trolling at this point. Harmon Walker says, have you seen the supposedly Shelley's new video? She has not posted in more than a year. One of the best 6-minute videos I've seen in the last 7 years. Yeah, give me a link. I got your message about it. Infinite Plane Radio.
This is Harmon.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, you mentioned a video by Suddenly Shelley.
Yeah, it's only a 6-minute video. You got to watch this. It replaces Canagoo.
What's the premise? What's it about?
You think Canagoo, but better.
Okay.
You know the Canagoo. You know what I'm saying?
Why don't you explain for people who don't know?
Canagoo is a mountain in France, Alps, that you can take a picture of. It's 176 miles away, and you can't see it except for twice a year when the sun goes behind it and backlights it and silhouettes it. So the sunlight will push to you. All the other time of the year, light that bounces off and returns to the eye, it's too far away and the atmosphere is too thick. So you can't see it. But twice a year, the sun sets behind Mount Canagoo, and you can see the whole silhouette of the mountain, just like if it's just setting right there. So that's what this new video shows of Catalina from Dana Point that this lady took that is just amazing.
Okay, and what is the distance from her vantage point to seeing the silhouetted mountain in front of the setting sun?
41 miles. 41 miles.
Okay,
And
interesting.
the highest point on Catalina is 2,100 feet, just about.
I'll have to look at that, but that's always interesting. I've seen a few videos where people are able to look at features highlighted by the sun at certain points of the year. And,
This is silhouetted, not highlighted.
silhouetted.
There's a difference, like Canagoo. There's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, silhouetted is what I meant because that would give away much more. I will get that video from you and I will review it and then I'll definitely discuss it tomorrow. Where I'm at certain points of the year, there's a highlighting of these turbines that are like 90 miles away that I can suddenly see.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm able from there to ascertain how far this other mountain is behind that. And then I'm always interested in these clouds behind this mountain that's 120 miles away. It's like these clouds 120 plus miles away are closer to the horizon, but they're still level with it. How come the clouds aren't tilting? You know how boats go over the hump?
Right.
How come clouds don't go over the hump?
Yeah. Well, they just, well, if you ask a Globie, they'll say it does. What you call it, though, people, the only reason we can see something is because the light is returning to your eyes. Like if you see a rock outside, the sunlight's bouncing off that rock, and then that light's bouncing back to your eyes, right? That's how we see.
Yes.
Okay, so if that rock was 20 miles away, that light that bounces off it won't reach your eyes anymore. That's why when the sun will set behind this rock or the mountain, the sunlight pushes to your eyes. It's strong enough to get to your eyes and go through the atmosphere, so that's why it silhouettes the stuff in front of it. And it's not bouncing light off the mountain. It's backlit it.
Gotcha.
And you can see it because the storm's like that.
Gotcha.
That's how it works.
Okay. And what is your
take? And that's
take?
how your windmills work.
Okay, now speaking of light, what is your take on the ISS spacewalks exhibiting light loss in the darkness of the pool?
Is that what happened yesterday or something? I didn't know that one. I just got onto your channel just
Okay, this is the thing I've been talking about lately is if you look at spacewalk photography, it's crystal clear. You can see the astronaut waving, you can see the Earth behind him. But then when they do the video of the spacewalks, usually like their helmet cams, you can see it as though you're the astronaut working on the outside of the space station, but the lighting's very different. The quality is different. You can't see that far. Everything disappears like 50 feet away, and there's hot spots with the light, and then the contrast is all screwed up, and there's also color loss, because when you go underwater a certain depth, first you lose red, then orange, then yellow. You lose the colors. So you see light loss and color loss consistent with it being 40 feet underwater.
That's very possible. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We know it's not real, so it doesn't matter whatever they're doing and faking it or or making it like underwater, filming it. We know that's already how they do it. So that's. I'm not saying it's old, but we all. I mean, does your audience not know this
Well,
or what?
no, this is very well known. However, when you look at the spacewalk footage, anybody who has any experience scuba diving or has ever done night diving, anybody who's done it professionally will be able to look at that and say, wait, that's light loss, which you wouldn't have in space. You would have it underwater because of what water does, the diffusion, but it wouldn't happen in the vacuum of space. And so what I'm saying is that pointing out the fact that you're looking at this diffusion and light loss to the right people who know photography, specifically people who do underwater photography, it would be very hard for them to deny that the space station's underwater.
Right. I mean, there's lots of people who know, just don't say. And guess what? The main thing is, they don't care. They just don't care.
Yeah, you know what? You're right about this. Not only do they not care, but they never cared, and they're so not interested that they don't even know what we're talking about. He's like, they like space station, like they don't even, the frame of reference of the main streamer is kind of vague about everything in space. They don't really think about it, so they're not the target for this information. For me, it's Truferville. At least they're trying, but most people don't care.
I'll give you an example of what happened one time. I golf with some golfers. I mean, they'd rather know how many dimples are on a golf ball than anything else in the world, than anything. That's how much they don't care about anything else. And we're all in our 60s and stuff. And they know me. I fall down sometimes on a hill saying, oh, the spin of the earth got me. I fuck with them all the time. They mess with me back. You know, we all do back and forth bantering about the flat earth because they all know I believe in it. So, but this one guy is so triggered by it. Even after 7 years of listening to me, about a month ago, all I said, and it was cloudy, I said, look at the sun coming through this. You shut up. And he took his club and threw it as far as he could. Just because all I said is, look at the sun.
You triggered him.
So, yeah, that's what you're dealing with.
You
Yeah.
absolutely triggered somebody. That is funny. To get triggered over the globe / flat earth conversation in 2024 is, I don't know. I'm not really sure. It's a type of, what is it? What do you think it is? Is it they're insecure?
They just don't like to think. They honestly, at my age, these guys don't want to think. They don't. It says it gives them a headache. I swear to God.
I guess
They don't want to think.
it's because you have all the answers, you've been comfortable, you've rested on that. The last thing you want to know is that it's wrong. I can see why they would want to shoot the messenger or throw the golf club.
That's right.
Awesome.
I just thought it's kind of neat. That's just my experience, you know. And then one of them says, "Well, I don't think you're stupid." He comes to talk to me on the side, you know, because he's he's actually hearing what I'm saying, and he's never thought of it that way. But the other 5, if they could, they'd all throw golf clubs at me. But I love it. It's fun. It is so fun.
Yeah, one thing I do like about this particular topic is that so many conspiracies are politicized. And the flat earthing is actually not just a conspiracy theory, it's actually more philosophical, epistemological. It gets into perception. And no other conspiracy theory does that. Everything else is about belief and who you trust. But this really comes down to, do you trust your perceptions more than what they tell you to believe? Do you allow them to augment it? And that's, to me, what it really comes down to. Are you willing to be skeptical about their big claims and go with what you can perceive? And people have been born in the box. They've never taken an out-of-the-box perspective. And that's why I think this conversation is useful.
Oh, someone says in your chat, I don't know how to say it, DUASYMPARA, says, just checked out Harmon's suggested video. The wiki banner ad says it can't be true. False alarm, I guess.
I love how YouTube automatically applies damage control to everything. If I see a wiki thing, it's like, okay, it's telling the truth. I don't even read what the wiki thing says. It's like, okay, it's been flagged because this is something they don't want you to think.
Yeah. What is your videos? I don't even pay attention anymore because I'm oblivious to those. Are all your videos flagged?
A lot of them these days will have mentions of contrails, chemtrails, or C19. Those are the main things they flag. And these are establishment conspiracy theories. But yeah, there's definitely an automatic flagging process that goes on, but I've been a little more careful since now we're actually monetized again.
Yeah, I don't even pay attention to it. Those I'm so tuned those out. You know what I'm saying? Those wiki things. I don't even see them in my mind.
Yeah, I don't even need
Yeah.
to either because, I mean, I understand. You have to understand all points of a conversation, all points of a debate, the point that's against yours. But I'm kind of not interested in their community notes and their attempt to guardrail every line of thinking. Like, don't we have the right to be wrong? I once thought about creating a YouTube channel where I just give wrong answers on everything on purpose. Like I just have this perverse desire to be wrong about everything because of free speech. Like I'm gonna have a video today about how the sky is orange, and they probably wouldn't let me do it. They're like, that's too creative. That's too out there. Like, what if I want to do it as an artist? Like, are there areas where we're allowed to be creatively reinterpreting the truth? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, these days, no.
And it says this guy says, "Dude, don't swing a club at me, Harmon. It was tongue in cheek." He said, "They're funny in the chat." But anyway, I was gonna say one more thing. I don't know if I said this to you before, not a month ago or so, but I really feel a shift lately of swinging towards the flat Earth again. 2018, when they hammered us down and really put a wrench in it from millions of days, number one tube search to nothing. I feel somehow it's coming back strong again. I feel that. I don't know. What is your perception?
I think that as the argumentation improves, there may be something. I do see something. Like, for example, Tyler Owens is this NFL draftee, and he said he doesn't believe in space. But he peppered his conversation with a lot of "I don't know, I don't believe." And that's different than saying, "I believe I'm on a pizza disc with a dome over it floating in space because the Bible." That's a completely different assertion than saying, "I don't believe in outer space." And
I like how he did that because he's being honest to himself. He's letting us know he's on board, but he ain't gonna jeopardize his job for it. I love that.
yeah, exactly. And I think that this is not something they can keep buried because the interest has not waned. I think Eric Dubay even put up a video recently, like a 10-year anniversary video for him on this topic, and it hasn't waned. The fact of it is, they had to artificially suppress the conversation, and the best they can do is they have these gloobers and glurfs just trying to shame people out of talking about it. But what I'm saying is, these individuals are unqualified. They believe all the fake news. So what do I care about any of their opinions? I just don't. Their opinions are not valid, actually.
Well, thank you so much for letting me talk on your show. I appreciate that.
Yeah, hey, appreciate
And
it.
you have a good day, and
Yeah,
I'll still listen to you here.
awesome. Okay, good. Thanks for calling, Harmon. And post a link to that video if you would like from Suddenly Shelley. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you.
Great call as always from Harmon. By the way, the average golf ball has 336 dimples, and all of these must be symmetrical. Salty says the wrongiest wronger who's ever wronged wrong. Yeah, exactly. I think that would be an interesting pursuit for a channel. Let's just have like parody. Like, as parody, can we just be wrong? Like today, talk about the cube Earth. Tomorrow, hollow Earth. You know, have a video a day just purposefully as artistic expression, being wrong about stuff. And no, they will damage control your free speech. They will damage control your artistic expression. Okay, so glurf. Glurf is, it means globe earther, but like Earth, globe Earth. Sort of like the globies refer to flat earthers as flurfs, which is a horrible word. I won't even say it. But I usually use gloober, which is a combination of goober and glober. But the people who defend the globe professionally, all day long, attacking straw men, going after the flat earth believers, like, yeah, have at them. I don't care about flat earth believers. If they haven't been to the edge, if they haven't done any exploration, if they haven't come up with a model and they're asserting to know that there's a model and they believe in it, yeah, you can go ahead and put them in the same category as globers. They've already assumed a closed system. But I'm not interested in those. I'm interested in more the shape agnostics, the ones who say, I don't know. I don't believe what they've shown me, but I don't have the full picture. And to try to debate a model versus model, a belief system versus a belief system, is pointless and fruitless. And moreover, the people who believe in it think everything in the news is real. So they're so reality compromised that there's no point to even conversing with them. Like they cannot possibly arrive at the right answer. They don't know that our entire reality has been augmented with visual lies. Contemporary myths have been created with psychological operations, and they've all taken the bait. They've all swallowed it. So there's no point to debating them. It won't get anywhere because their debates are not honest. Ad hominem, straw man, and they make arguments based or coming from a place of abysmal ignorance about how video can be manipulated. They act like they don't see it. Okay, moving on. Ozzy Osbourne was heavily inspired by Hitler, so he has no reason to deny, yay, the right to use Iron Man. Hypocrite. Going through my notes here. Oh, yes. The other day, I was having a conversation with Lloyd, and he had agreed with me that contrails exist. But he said we can't rule out that they're not putting chemicals in the contrails. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You don't start with you can't rule out. You have to rule it in first. Can't rule out that unicorns aren't flying through the stratosphere and their territorial markings are toxic to humans. Can't rule that out. Like, actually, no, you can. Hitchens' razor, that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. But lately I've been posting these on Twitter. Chemtrails give you AIDS. You can find that hashtag. And I said to Lloyd, I don't know if AIDS comes from chemtrails, but I can't rule it out. I mean, not all AIDS, obviously. I mean, Exalt caught his from a baboon he met on Twitter. Just kidding. But anyway, if you go to Twitter and you search chemtrails give you AIDS, I am building up a lot of content that basically shows airplanes spelling AIDS in the sky and people putting masks on. But is this absurd? Is this any more hyperbolic than the claim of geoengineering manipulating the weather? Is this any more hyperbolic than people saying they're spraying an X over my house today because I'm targeted? No. If we're going to go into the realm of hyperbole, speculation, and can't rule anything out, then yes, let's rule in chemtrail AIDS. Put on your mask. Donald Trump supporters are creating and sharing fake AI images of him with black voters. So here's an image of Trump at what looks to be a Christmas party, and it looks real. And this is apparently viral. Fascinating. This is from metro.co. Donald Trump supporters creating and sharing fake AI images of him with black voters. So this is the deep fakery that we've been warned about. A new report from BBC Panorama reveals that dozens of AI images have been concocted to produce pictures of black people supporting Mr. Trump in a bid to encourage more to vote in 2024. You think this will work? And then yesterday there was some deep fake fear porn about Putin using deep fake porn to bring chaos to the West. So again, more fear porn about deep fake becoming deep faked porn. Here's another picture of Trump on a porch with a number of individuals here. And people share these things. They don't even reality test them. There's this image that's pretty viral of Trump praying in a church, and there's like sunlight from the window behind him, and it's a really, idyllic, peaceful picture of him, but it's fake. But nobody cares. I got a comment from God Was Bored on YouTube yesterday. He said, I listened to the entire Joe Rogan Cat Williams interview. Oh yeah, this is where they misgendered Baphomet, which I think can get you kicked off of X. Baphomet is intersex and interspecies. The idea of associating him with, it's insane. Baphomet is not a demon. And that's another thing. It's not the devil, it's not a demon. Anyway, Baphomet is a combination of symbols. It's a visual description of arcane perfection, as in A balanced being, male, female, beast, angel, man right there, perfectly poised in the middle, but consciousness directed up towards the torch of illumination. It's not necessarily a negative symbol, but it's been kind of taken as such for a few reasons, mostly just because the right wing culture warriors. But Joe Rogan and Cat Williams' interview was listened to by God is Bored, and he said they reference a lot of stuff. Joe acts like he heard something and he goes on to describe controversial conspiracies but doesn't know much about them, when he clearly does. They both act like they're revealing and discussing profound stuff, but it's always a nothing burger, and there's no repercussions for them letting the cat out of the bag. Also worth noting, Cat was wearing a checkerboard sweater with a checkerboard pattern. Yeah, very Masony. When he started talking about the Baphomet, I thought it doesn't sound like any description I heard before. He was also wearing a huge ship's wheel or helm symbol. Anyway, he's going on about this conversation between Cat Williams and Joe Rogan. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, but there's a point where Joe Rogan was saying that we need religion and religion has made people moral. And I'm like, what religion is he talking about? I still haven't figured that out. Duas Impera says, at least you can choose to vote or not in the US. In Australia, we get fined if we don't vote. Can't, oh wow. Yeah, I'm thinking about voting for Joe Biden because I don't believe it matters. It's, in my view, it's all pre-scripted and fake, and the fact that the moon landing is fake and the government goes along with it means that they're a bunch of liars. They never fix that. And they've only lied more since then. It's an edifice of lies. It's a big performance thing with the politicians. It's just part of the mind control theater bred in circuses. My point being, I'm not interested in the voting process or getting involved. I'm not an activist. I'm a conscientious objector to this war. So of course I'm not going to pull the lever and give my assent to this perpetual, I guess that's the perpetual war, 1984. That's what Orwell called it. But I don't want to perpetuate it. However, since 2016 or so, or 2015 or so, the conspiracy theorists have been dog whistled to, pandered to, seduced by the GOP. Trump absorbed all the conspiracy theorists who weren't auto hoaxers and dragged them onto the political horseshoe, made them into alt-right culture warriors. They're part of MAGA Stan. Q basically successfully merged the conspiracy theory realm of alt media and MSM Plus with politics. So one of the things you're going to see is anybody in Trutherville is going to vote for Trump. There's just no other way around it. And I thought, maybe to make a statement, I'll vote for Joe Biden just to prove that I don't care. Almost like I was going to take a V just to prove that I don't care. But they wouldn't do it in my neck. If I can get a doctor to agree to give me the fiver in the neck, I would have done it on Instagram. It's like, yeah, vax me right here in the jugular. And I'll show Trutherville that I believe what I'm saying here about this all being a construct. Like, I'll show you I don't care. But that's kind of in the past. But I will vote for Joe Biden. In fact, I might even advocate for him. I'll do some political organizing. I'll have a meetup here for Biden voters. All right, moving on. Chemtrails give you AIDS. I got a message from Sandy Diva. Says, Jose Sagittarius Arms sent me here. Excited to listen. Awesome. Okay, good. We have a new listener sent to us by Jose Sagittarius Arm. Glad that he's still listening. Tyrone McCloskey says, a vote for Biden is a vote for Harris. Biden will get her installed when he dies. Otherwise, she's unelectable. Okay, I was talking about the series Griselda. And the subtext of Griselda is sexism and how she's not respected. They don't take her seriously. She starts off as a prostitute and then she becomes a mob boss, but the other mob bosses don't want to take her seriously. Similarly, one of the reasons she's able to get away with it so long is the men at the FBI don't believe that there could be a female mob boss, so they don't take it seriously. The only person that does is a female cop who isn't taken seriously. So she has to fight to be taken seriously to go after this other mob boss who's not taken seriously. But it's all about basically Barbie feminism, as I was saying. The main character, hides her pregnancy, kills her husband, fights sexist mob bosses, but eventually gains their respect. So what I'm saying is Kamala Harris has not been put out there as someone all that respectable in the sense of she has no gravitas. It's like her speeches are written by ChatGPT. But I think that's by design. I think this is all to perhaps even suggest that maybe she hasn't been given a fair shot because it's a man's world and there's going to be some kind of a turnaround. And I've seen this with a lot of shows on Netflix I could list, where it's all about the strong female leaders, these Harris archetypes. Wheel of Time did this, The 100 did this. There's probably about 50 other shows on Netflix, but it's a reoccurring theme. Another big one was DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, which is about a post-Civil War America and this Kamala Harris type, and they're fighting against the nationalists. But yes, we have been given plenty of predictive programming for when it's time to take Kamala Harris seriously. And so yes, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. Tyrone says the old white man will lose his highest position in the patriarchy. Yeah, I consider this back when they first put that ghoul in the Oval Office. I'm like, why would they do this? Oh, I see. They need us to visually witness the death of the white American patriarchy. Have an old white man, ineffectual, die in front of us. And this will be replaced by somebody vibrant and alive and somebody who's going to probably show up if it's not Kamala. But I think it's going to be her. All right, let's see here. G33 says Conway the Machine, a rapper from Buffalo. I think he has an album called Griselda. Yeah, Griselda's infamous. It's based on a true story. And I've come across some interesting threads linking the Griselda story. I'll get into it soon. There's definitely more to it. Nothing released by Netflix is released into a vacuum. It's all considered to be contemporary or concurrent programming, as in whatever they're showing you is going to relate to what's in the news at that time, without question. All right, let's see here. Breaking: Democrats announced they're working on federal legislation to remove Trump from the ballots. Yeah, they're coping. FBI launches a manhunt for Iranian secret agent accused of plotting to assassinate Trump-era officials, including Mike Pompeo, in revenge for the killing of Soleimani. So this is some more foreshadowing. We were talking about the letter that Don Trump Jr. got that said that the grandson of Lee Harvey Oswald needs to complete the work. Little side note here. Maybe it's nothing, but Marcus Goldfinch of George News has gone dark for 5 days now. And one of his last tweets was a revelation. He admitted that he was filming this interview in New Zealand of Garrett Ziegler, that he was in the room filming it for Sky News. And then shortly after, he disappeared. This is kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly what, but if you're not quite aware, I put a spotlight on him by suing Google because of this guy's actions and including him as a co-defendant. And right now we're just waiting for the first pretrial date, which is in May. But what Google admitted on the phone to me, their attorneys, is that we don't represent him and we're victims of his fraud, as are you. So they admitted that fraud, a felony fraud, has been committed. So we have that on the table. And they're going to be sued for millions of dollars because someone else committed a crime using their platform, lying to their legal department. So suddenly, they're more on my side than not when it comes to him. And this is the triangulation I planned when I sued this way. I realized I don't have the power or the authority to get some government agent who's anonymous and traveling the world. I don't have the pool to bring him out into the light. However, if I can convincingly implicate and appropriately implicate YouTube/Google in this crime, then I can bring the weight of this superior court in California and that judge and the other defendants to perhaps leaning on the legal process and to somehow force a prosecution and indictment. So that's what I've been waiting for, because there's plenty of evidence that I provided in my filings with my FBI reports and everything else, including the emails, to haul this guy in. He's convictable. He's indictable. So the fact that he's been quiet for 5 days, I'd like to think this might be something, but we shall see. But regardless, we're going to win this eventually, sooner or later. Every one of these lawsuits has taken us a step closer and a step closer, and now we're in the right venue, and we're just waiting for my day in court. But again, the evidence speaks for itself. Yesterday, I was on Fakeologist 849. We had a conversation about a lot of things, including AI art, fakery in general, and where we are on the world stage. So if you didn't catch that, I'm putting all of my archives now on YouTube. I'm sorry, on Twitter. So if you go to X and you follow me, every day I will be posting the video archives there as well. I pay for the blue check for that alone, and it's definitely worth it because I get a lot of traffic on X as well. Let's see here. Duis in Paris says Power Ranger curse got him. That's what I'm hoping for. The red Power Ranger curse. I mean, there's a lot of Power Rangers going back who put on the red uniform and afterward end up committing atrocious crimes, from murdering a roommate with a samurai sword over a girl, to tying a couple of old people to a anchor, drowning them after forcing them to sign documents. Another one gave himself a sex change in prison with a razor blade. And let's see, the other one after that, one of the more recent ones had committed COVID fraud to the tune of several $1,000,000, and so he's in jail. But every single one of the Red Power Rangers has come to some sort of a terrible end. You know, murders, deaths, killing roommates, killing people, going crazy. And Goldfinch is up next. I'm like, okay, the last one just got the COVID fraud, so Goldfinch is the next one, and so we're waiting for the curse of the Red Power Ranger to catch up with him. Let's see here. Rolling Stone exclusive. Under Donald Trump, the White House medical unit was like the Wild West. It was awash in speed and Xanax. Senior and mid-level staff had access to powerful stimulants and sedatives. Trump's White House awash in speed. This is worth mentioning, considering how often he called for the death penalty of drug dealers. Again, breaking, Supreme Court unanimously sides with Donald Trump in Colorado's effort to disqualify him from the primary ballot. This is going to have blowback. The lefties have got to be agitated at this point. Unbelievable. All right, moving on. Somebody needs to stop this. What is it spraying? This is the Rock of Gibraltar, and it's carrying moisture off the top from the Mediterranean, and that moisture condenses and it creates this cloud. So you're looking at clouds being formed just like that. So this again is another example of, I think, the completely predictable, natural, and very well understood phenomenon of cloud formation as it applies to, airplane condensation trails. Well, it's really just about altitude and humidity. We've been fighting a lot of chemtrail believers on X, and it's been very useful. I really appreciate the debate. Debates should be useful. There should be winners, there should be losers. Good arguments should be advanced. Bad arguments should be deleted, nullified. There should be progress following debates. And so I think we're doing it right, because every time I delve into a topic, whether it's gematria calculators, Mandela effects, or chemtrails, I tend to find more and more about the strategery of the other side. And it sheds a light on how gate-kept and controlled Trutherville is. And Trutherville is where you end up when you realize that the world's lying. through the media that everything's a lie, and you look for the truth. So you go to Trutherville, where the truthers are. But the truthers are really just reactions. These are just reactionaries. They're just having reactions to whatever the mainstream says. Whatever the mainstream says, I'm against it. Since they're liars, I'm truthy. Meanwhile, the mainstream believe they're truthy, and the other side are conspiracy theorists. It's how they maintain the dialectic here. Selena says, next hoax, who knows? Blackouts maybe, losing our data, backed up memories, one scary swoop, or a Taylor Swift psyop. The blackout thing has been on the table for a long time, and my prediction is this. Disease X has always been about mind viruses. They set the premise that the most dangerous person in the world is the super spreader who's healthy, because even though they're healthy, they can carry it to people who aren't, which makes them dangerous. Similarly, we have a lot of people in society who are so mentally ill that if you spread certain ideas, they'll go shoot up bowling alleys. So their premise here is that you got to mask your mind, and we have to lock down the internet to get rid of mind viruses before it's safe to come out again. So my prediction is Disease X, mind viruses will be the pretext for locking down the internet and getting rid of, quote, mind viruses. A massive sanitation effort. That's what's happening next. That's going to be, I think, the blackout. And I think the thing that will make the case, as in the eyes of the public, will be if it wasn't for X and hateful memes and mind viruses and misinformation, the domestic violent extremists wouldn't have nuked Seattle. They wouldn't have joined with Putin. So there's going to be some calamity, and even though there's going to be a group they're going to scapegoat, obviously it's going to be domestic violent extremists, white MAGAs, even though they're going to be scapegoated, ultimately the blame is going to be free speech. And Musk is there to take a fall for free speech. He gives the deceived the impression that he's fighting for free speech because he's a culture warrior and he says politically incorrect things, but it's all a ruse, sort of like space. And yet, of course, people believe it. Tomanoid says the Civil War movie comes out April. Oh, that's right. It comes out April 12th. Wait a minute. The movie's called. It's by the same guy who directed 28 Days Later, but they moved the release date. What is the release date for it? And then Civil War will probably begin right after that. And we watched the trailer a few times. Civil War chilling trailer depicts a scary vision of America. 1 hour, 9 minutes long. A race to the White House in a near future America, balanced on the razor's edge. And it's by Alex Garland. But yes, it's coming out just as we're having the anniversary of the Civil War beginning. Confederate troops fired on Fort Sumter, April 12, 1861. Are they going to fake a civil war here? Predictive programming doesn't tell you what's going to happen. That's a major truther misconception. Yep, this movie comes out on April the 12th. Civil War is scheduled to have its world premiere at South by Southwest on March 14th. And it will have its theatrical release on April the 12th. Fascinating. Again, Alex Garland's movie 28 Days Later is about a rage virus where these apes are watching the mainstream media, they're watching violence, and then they become enraged, they become violent, and becomes a transmissible violence, a virus, like a violence virus, a rage virus. And when that guy Robert Card was said to have gone into a Twitter bubble and got full of rage, and then he went and he shot up a bowling alley, they kept saying it was a rampage. And I kept seeing words like rage thrown in there, and I thought, this Alex Garland rage virus and the Civil War, there's some connection here. And I think it's all connected, of course, to this free speech question. We can't have so many guns floating around, but we also can't have the free speech that motivates people to use those guns. But this rage virus thing is the Disease X. Disease X is the radicalizing mind virus that makes you dangerous. Is anybody else here looking forward to Seattle getting nuked? I am. I am looking forward to the simulated atomic blast that's going to happen probably underwater off the coast of Seattle, but I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the simulated head wound of Trump. Loop tweeted this today. I don't know what book this is, but it's page 111. The art of observing and not absorbing. The art of observing and not absorbing. So how do you observe without absorbing? Well, skepticism. It's primarily a suspension of judgment. I'm observing the news, but I'm not reacting. I'm not assuming it to be true until proven fake because the screen is a liar. But I'm going to suspend judgment until I have more information. I'm not going to respond real time. Nobody can trigger me. There's no button they can push that's going to get me to jump, even though the rest of the population is ready to jump at the push of the right button. But observing without absorbing or observing without reacting is what I advocate here. Because if your first response is to react, to cry, to rage, you're going to have a lot of ups and downs. And that's part of what entrains you. Mind control entrainment. Like, for example, after the Lahaina fires, which may not even have been real fires. I mean, they have real fires, but they have this scene where it seemed like these fires were uncharacteristically bad. So Trutherville says, oh, those are obviously from Chinese space lasers. And then Mainstreamville is like, no, that's actually caused by climate change. So one side is like climate change caused that, and that was mainly caused by the right wing and capitalists. But then the other side is saying, no, this was caused by secret space lasers, some kind of secret government operation. But the point of it is both sides agree that some event happened. They both agree and they both react. One wants to shut down capitalism because it's causing fires out there in Lahaina, and the other side wants to start hyping up this idea that there's 1,500 children who are incinerated and nobody's talking about them. My point of it is, those who aren't observing without absorbing, but who are absorbing first, end up crying a lot more. And a lot of Trutherville was mourning over these fake dead kids. And I kept saying, fake dead kids' lives don't matter. And they'd be like, how dare you? Like, they actually want to kill me, practically, over saying that fake dead people's lives don't matter. Like, they would fight me over that. But they don't. And if you have an argument that you can advance that suggests that we should care about the lives of fake dead people, I'm all ears. But I see no reason for it. I ran this by Alex Stain after he went to Uvalde to cry about fake dead kids. And I'm like, those lives don't matter. He blocked me. They matter to some people. Poncho Lefty says, good night, guys. Eastern time zone. I got to work in the morning. Awesome. Thanks for joining. And we may be live in the morning as well. I meant to be this morning, but I was catching up on the eBay store. So the eBay store is very active right now. Channel's monetized. Books have been ordered. And at some point this month, we're going to kick off the book tour / promotion for Auto Hoaxology 101. This is where it's at. It says alt media is the JV team for the mainstream media. Yes, very well put. That's exactly what it is. Alt media is the JV team. We've known this for some time, but it wasn't until recently that we decided we have to literally split. You can't beat this system from within. We have to create the parallel media. We have to take the off-world stage perspective and let these others know, as we go into Trutherville, we aim our turret at those guardrails and blow them up. A lot of these truthers who are close to the edge will spill over. They will join us. But those who don't, we will let them know, until you cease to be a mainstream believer, until you cease to be a good NPC Truman in your Truman world, you can't sit with us. And at first they don't care because we're marginalized. We're on the fringe as they see it. But when they find out we're on the cutting edge and when they see the numbers of us growing, a lot of them will want to join us. But they won't unless they raise their standards of evidence and refuse to carry propaganda for alt media. if you're a propaganda mule for the JV team of the MSM, you're not going to do any good. But that's the objective for 2024. That is the Planet Killer Auto Hoax 2024 space rock on its way to the world stage. I don't have an exact date as when it's going to impact, but it's coming. All right, moving on. Going through my tweets again. I'm going to try to get Crypto Kubrology onto the program. We actually communicated on Twitter and he wants to do some podcasts. So if you haven't followed him, I'll put a link below. He's done a lot of great decoding. We'll get back to that. And you know, another metascriptor that's worth looking into, I think, is Stephen King. I've been thinking about lately. Because Stephen King and Kubrick have these connections. The Shining, for example. You know, there's a sequel to The Shining called Doctor Sleep, which I'm going to have to watch. But I've already mentioned tonight how The Shining has plenty of predictive programming for 9/11. So isn't it interesting that the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, has a character, a baby, a young baby that has psychic powers and predicts 9/11? The sequel to The Shining has a character that predicts 9/11. The first Shining predicts 9/11 with predictive programming. There's no way that Stephen King is an outsider to this process. This is where it's at. It says, I'm interested in your take on cults. They're blowing up right now. I don't think they want anyone to be in any independent groups. So many cults now in the urban space. Yeah, cults have always been demonized, obviously. My take on cults is there are destructive cults and there are other cults that are constructive. And the term cult's sort of a pejorative. But like what we have here, you could say that this is a cult of non-believers. It's ground zero for a growing culture that has splintered off of alt media. But the dangerous cults, or the ones that are unhealthy, would be the ones that have you sacrifice your individuality. They gaslight you into going with what the cult believes. So most cults in that sense are inimical to individuality. And of course, it creates these power dynamics that makes people who are exploitable readily accessible to predators ready to use them. But why would the media have a problem with cults or any groups? I think they want to demonize the concept of cults because they don't want any sort of bulwark between the people and Big Brother. Every person has to have a one-on-one relationship with the screen, and so they don't want your church getting in the way of that. They don't want your club or your group or your conferences getting between mass media and the individuals in the club. It breaks the filter. So they're going to be against cults that don't automatically or intrinsically reiterate and reinforce the dominant worldview. But they probably want to have the public terrified of the idea of cults, so it's easy to demonize them and shut them down. In fact, there's a song by Chief Crow. It was the first Chief Crow song that I heard. He had emailed me and he'd been listening to the music to the podcast, and we had actually come across this before. We had a lot of people
Start your radio station.
pejoratively calling us a cult. They said the IPS is a cult, and I realized at some point it's like, we kind of are. This is ground zero for something. We are a cult. We're a self-aware cult, and that's what we need. What we need now is for auto hoaxers, which are really just skeptics in the Pyrrhonic sense. We're pyromaniacs on the world stage. But we do need to form a cult. We need to gang up. We need to quarantine, and we need to separate from the believers. We have become, in a sense, a cult, a very constructive cult. I wouldn't say this is destructive. But more importantly, what we're doing is a leaderless cult. That's a key thing here, because cult leaders can be targeted to destroy the entire thing. And what I realize with this is what we need is to be united on the ideas. And that's why I put out Auto Hoaxology 101. I was like, we need to have some kind of book that codifies what we're really about, that we can all be on the same sheet with. But this is a constructive cult with no leader, and there's a point where once the ideas are there, it can grow on its own. It can have splinters, other people, content creators who are operating on the same premise can do their own thing, and there's no way to stop it. But we were having a conversation on cults the other day. We were talking about superorganisms. It was a conversation with a caller, and I brought up Howard Bloom, who has a lot to say about this idea of uh, cults or societies or just collectives of people acting like an organism, and each person becomes like a cell in that organism, and how you can have something of a hive mind. And I would argue that the mainstream mediated worldview creates a hive mind. It's just you don't notice it very much because there's not a lot of friction between the mainstream telling you what's happening in the world and what's happening in the world. If you're not looking, you might not notice the discrepancies. You might not notice the glitches. But it has everyone entrained on the same sheet. And if they want everybody in the world to look at, to think about, to obsess over, and to talk about Taylor Swift, they can do it. I practically didn't know who she was. She was on the periphery, not a character in my life. And in the month leading up to the Super Bowl until the day after, Taylor Swift was in our faces every day on every magazine. There is a hive mind, and they can unite us on anything. And that's an example also, by the way, of a psyop. The Pentagon said it wasn't a psyop. It was a psyop. What I would consider to be a psyop is a perception management stunt, a PR stunt, an artificial or simulated event or scenario or narrative or story superimposed over reality. A psychological operation will create a myth, a contemporary myth, a story, but it basically is a way to augment reality and get it, and it requires that everybody's synchronized. Everybody's in agreement on this one thing. Like 9/11 wouldn't have worked if we weren't all up in the morning watching the news. If everybody had slept in, it wouldn't have worked. They need everybody synchronized. And we were all synchronized on Taylor Swift. All right, let's continue here. This is where it's at. It says 50 people live off the grid and grow food. They'll be called a cult. Oh, yeah, Owen Benjamin's Beartaria was not only called a cult, but the Daily Beast was comparing it to Ruby Ridge. And we're expecting some kind of standoff with the ATF. And I guess, this might also have to do with this. Not a coincidence that Donald Trump kicked off his campaign last year in Waco, Texas. And of course, Netflix released Waco, American Apocalypse, the night before. So there again, a connection because Waco is about the genesis of the white nationalism in America. Timothy McVeigh, this martyr, was there. Alex Jones was radicalized there. He helped rebuild the Branch Davidian temple after it was burned. 33-year-old Dave Koresh, whose followers believed he was Jesus, and once he died, they were all going to come back and win the apocalypse or whatever. Yeah, he was 33, incinerated, burned, but that was a cult. And MAGA is a cult, Qult. So there's definitely an agenda here to demonizing the concept of cults and people who are splintering away from mainstream. Dewis in Paris says, I don't waste my breath anymore. There's a crux of the whole thing. If a person doesn't find FE theory interesting, that person is not interesting. Yeah, if someone doesn't find it interesting that there's even a remote possibility that they are wrong about their worldview, that they're pretty sure they got it, if they're so certain that they have all the right answers, then they're not that interesting. They're incurious. I find curious people to be interesting, and they can kill your curiosity by giving you all these false answers and giving you a false sense of knowing. Like, oh, we know everything. Or if we don't know, we can just Google it. And everything is known from the end of the Earth's atmosphere all the way to the edge of the universe. And what we don't know is what's way out there beyond the edge, but we have a pretty clear idea of what's between there and there. And the difference between that vast universe of knowing and those who question NASA is simply that our question marks are just a few thousand miles away. We don't push them out there trillions of miles away, which means that we're a little more honest in saying what we don't know, because the people who think they know everything about what's from here to the edge of the universe can merely believe it. They don't have any direct experience of it. This is where it's at. It says an IPS documentary on cults. I would purchase that. These no cults are weird. Yeah, I've been involved with cults, and I studied cult deprogramming. And I think it's fascinating to look at cult mind control and how it relates to toxic relationships between individuals and within families, because it becomes a unit. It's a cybernetic system. It's a system. The family system, the church, and then even as a society, you have these. If you look at it as a closed system, and when somebody leaves one as an individual, there's often a tendency to go back or to find another one. This is true with cults, and it's true with toxic relationships. And what they have in common is both get the individual to sacrifice their self for the stronger personality of the cult leader or their control freak in their life, who gets them to cancel themselves and put the other person's needs first, or sacrifice yourself and your own needs for your church or your cult. So when people leave these groups, they have a bit of a disconnect between who they really are, because who they were before they went in the cult is no longer there. The cult has erased that and replaced it with their artificial personality that the cult accepts. So when people leave these damaging, toxic dynamics, they have to be deprogrammed. And I've been suggesting for some time that leaving the mainstream mediated worldview is an act of deprogramming. In fact, if you go to ips.monster, I have a link there to some of the books, and one of the books it's on Amazon. It's called World Stage Deprogramming Guide. And I wrote that specifically thinking of this as you're having to break free from a cult mindset. So what you have to do is you have to put yourself on top of this, on top of the list of trusted sources. For most people, the screen has deposed the self. You're taught from very early on that your perceptions don't matter if they don't align with the screen. Screen comes first. Screen is authority. Cult is authority. Control freak is authority. You see, you're giving away your power. But when you exit the media, you have to put yourself first. You have to put the I, back. You have to recognize I am the final arbiter of what I believe, and it's going to be based on evidence. So it's a way of, again, asserting the self over the collective. To join the collective, you have to sacrifice the self. We lived through this in 2020. You're selfish if you don't want to cover your face, which your face is your individuality. You have to efface that in order to become one with the hive. Tominoid says, oh, the universe is flat. Yeah, the universe is flat. Galaxies are flat. The solar system is flat. Most people who believe in the solar system don't know what they believe in. And this is what Harman said, that they don't care. Ask any heliocentrist, hey, what is the shape of the solar system? And they will generally imagine it to be a bunch of balls floating around the light like a big atom or something. But when you tell them, no, it's flat. Why do you think we have an ecliptic plane? I mean, I guess you could look at Pluto, if it's a planet or not, and it's slightly below the plane, but that's because it's the, lord of the underworld. But yeah, it's flat, and they say it's because of the conservation of angular momentum. Galaxies too. But the universe isn't a ball floating in space. The universe is flat, and that's a problem. So you can laugh at flat Earth all you want, like, oh, if it was flat, cats would have pushed everything off the edge by now. Well, your universe is flat. And if you think about it, if you believe in the conventional model, the Earth is going to be absorbed by the sun, killed by a planet-killing asteroid. It's not going to be around forever, but the universe is. So flat wins in the end. Flat Earth trumps globe. I mean, flat Earth might lose to globe Earth temporarily, but flat universe wins in the end. Flat is the rule. Ball's the exception. Skyfish says, wouldn't believing the mainstream media narrative be the biggest cult? Yes. It's the biggest cult. And what's the definition of a cult? The church down the street from yours. A church seems to be more legitimate than a cult because it's bigger. Well, the mainstream media is the de facto world state church. It's the biggest cult. It's the biggest religion. It trumps and supplants all the other religions. And just like any other cult, it's a toxic cult, I would even say. It's a doomsday cult that says the world's going to end. You're terrible. You're a super spreader. And you are responsible for everything that's wrong with the world, which, again, it's going to end soon. It's a doomsday cult. And I think convincing you that the world's going to end soon has a connection here to the idea of telling you where, or artificially constraining your sense of how big it is. Like people say, well, why would they lie? They're not lying simply to control your minds and prevent you from going with religion and to make you believe in science. That's what most flat earth debaters will say. Oh, they're lying to hide God, which makes zero sense to me. No, the lying is for greed and control, if anything. They're probably hiding more land and more resources. But the idea of constraining how much world there is, oh, the world ends right here, puts you in a closed system, puts you in the Truman Show where you can be controlled. Similarly, telling you that the world's going to end next year also shrinks your world. They shrink it with space, they shrink it with time. There's no infinity in this picture. It's all finitude. World ends here, time ends here. They take away your concept of forever and plug you into the now, which they control. You're not allowed to suspend judgment because you have to believe it right now. What are you waiting for? Believe, cry, donate to GoFundMe. Cry for the fake dead kids. It's like, no, I'm going to wait until somebody shows me an autopsy so I know I'm crying for a real person. And so far, no one has provided any evidence of any real victims. This is where it's at. It says, how long has AI been writing the news? Now, AI can only grab from whatever's fed into it. So from the very beginning, you could say that our news has been artificial because the pool of information that is allowed to be put into the news is similarly limited. So the people writing the news may as well have been AI. But there was a recent story about how, I think it was ESPN, didn't have any real writers. They've been using AI to write up their game previews. They use AI and it's infuriated their staffs. But not only that, they have fake writers. So they've actually got fake people. Sports Illustrated alleged AI articles complete with fake writer headshots shock industry. Yep. For decades, as the glossy standard bearer of sports journalism enjoyed by millions of readers, Sports Illustrated served high-quality writing, stunning photographs. But this week, it was the center of another storm when they were accused of publishing stories generated by artificial intelligence under bylines and headlines of writers who themselves have been fabricated. Yep, fake writers, fake stories. Look how easily, though, the people who work in media are replaceable. The legacy media. Funnily, Elon Musk had said something last week. He said, people who still believe in legacy media live in an alternate reality. Yeah, it's true. But the people who believe in new media live in a false reality. Key word here is believe. This is where it's at. It says, Newsbenders, greatest show ever. Thanks, Tim. It was a game changer for me. Yeah, I actually added Newsbent to the Auto Hoaxer lexicon. Auto Hoaxology 101 has a lexicon. I added Newsbent, referring to the news bent reality. And by this I mean the reality that is being steered by a prefabricated history played out on the world stage like a reality TV show. Prefabricated. That alone tells you there's no reason to overreact. Why would you overreact to something that was scripted to happen in advance? Let's see. Today is 3/4, Yesterday was 3/3, and I'd mentioned that it was the 33rd anniversary of Rodney King's beating, and here we go. Just to show you that they are very consistent with their symbolism, and the king and the 33 are always associated. Numerous baton strikes on King, resulting in 33 blows. And of course, that happened over the course of 1 minute and 19 seconds, which is an interesting number. All has to do with the fall of the Tower of Babel, and that's America, Babylon. And one of the things that's going to be precipitating the fall, which is already happening, is this entire 1619 versus 1776 dialectic. And the race war psyops are an intrinsic part of this takedown. This is where it's at. It says we live in the multiverse, and that is flat. It's like Minecraft. Look, here's something too, though. Like when I said earlier, I don't believe the universe exists till we experience it. Like I don't think the universe is out there. Like we're apes with big brains on this rock, floating in space, and it's out there. And it's like the static thing. It exists, and we're on it, passing through time. I don't think it works that way. Like I really don't think that it exists until it's experienced, and I think the experiencers are actually a part of this. And in other words, the idea of linear time is really mostly just an assumption based on past, present, future, following a seeming, causal, logical sequence. But synchronicity, for example, is one of the main things that would suggest to me that it may not be the rule, but rather it's just like it's the norm, but there could be exceptions, or there are exceptions. And I'm just suggesting also that maybe panpsychism may have a lot to explain as far as, is the universe meaningless? Is it dead, grinding to a halt? Or is it living? Is everything information? And that's kind of what I think. I think everything is meaningful, and perception and meaning has everything to do with the process of elucidating creation itself. And I think that perceivers are an intrinsic part of it, which means, yeah, it doesn't exist till we get there. I could be wrong. I doubt it. Okay, continuing. If you haven't seen this, I'm going to have this made as a poster, and I'll put the link out if anybody wants to order it. It's the real world and the screened reality. And this diagram will help you plot your friends and family on the world stage, so you know where everybody stands. So your woke friends and your alt-right conspiracy believing InfoWar friends, they live in MSM plus, which is a nightmare. Your normie friends live in MSM, which is a dream world. It's blissful. Now they have all the psyops, the augmented reality, the atrocities, the media fakery, but they're apathetic to it. So one group is agitated, red pill or woke. The other group is calm and apathetic, the blue pillars. But those of us who have stepped outside of the box, who have exited the box, who have stepped back through the screen, we exist in what I call MSM minus, which is saying fake until proven real. We don't just believe it automatically. This would be non-believers, media skeptics, auto hoaxers, whose minds have basically been cleansed, or rather the hoodwink has been lifted. Like Aldous Huxley, or rather, was it in the Doors of Perception? He's actually quoting William James, but it's basically saying if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would see things as they are, infinite. And what I'm suggesting here is that the screen is a filter, and this filter has a lot of presuppositions built into it. And so when you step out of this screen, you step out of their box, out of their constraints, maybe you do see things as infinite. Infinite until proven finite. But here's the thing. The only others on this side of the screen are crisis actors, propagandists, psyop operatives, and controlled opposition at various levels of awareness about how deep the fakery goes. But it's interesting that we're sharing this side of the screen with the bad actors. And at this time, they might outnumber us. How many people are involved at a deep level in the mass mind control operations that use perception management and psyops? I don't know how many. My concept here is let's get an equal number or more to compete with the capstone level operatives in the live world order. Let's get 10,000 on this side and then see what happens there. I think we're in for some very interesting times up ahead once we have the numbers to actually have some meaningful debates and confrontations that can't be swept under the rug. And I don't think I'm overstating it, and I don't think I'm being overly optimistic, but I think there's a very real possibility that this line of, we'll just say philosophical inquiry, could potentially do billions of damage to mainstream media narrative infrastructure. Look how many tens of billions of dollars, or how, I mean, who knows how much it is. It's all going into this. We think military spending. Where do you think it's all going? $78 million a day for NASA. Where's it all going? It's going to mind control, controlling your inner space, your worldview. So to me, I'm like thinking, if we go for that, so instead of fighting the info war, left versus right, Proud Boy versus Soy Boy, if instead of fighting with the pieces on the chessboard, we aim to flip the board over itself, I think we'll get better results. But you don't start by going after mainstream media and mainstream believers because they're all brainwashed. We start with alt media, and this is why I've been going after truth or orthodoxies. We have to start from the fringe. We have to break the guardrails and see who's awake. Then we'll get an idea of how fast this can progress. But there's no stopping it. We've already crossed the point of no return, and that's really largely due to all of you and your persistence. You know, we've been at this for some time as a think tank, operating on this premise, not stepping back from it, not relenting, no compromising. There are people who say, well, maybe you should still let people say false flag. You know, spoon feed people, plant seeds, Socratic method. I'm like, nah, I don't believe in planting seeds. I believe in clear cutting forests. I don't think we need to use a Socratic method. I think we need to initiate paradigm shock, a paradigm shock to the system, like it's never seen before, because this shouldn't have happened. I don't think this, like, I'm not running a limited hangout operation. I'm not controlled opposition. We aren't propaganda mules for alt media by any stretch. What we're doing is truly against the grain and against mind or MK Ultra culture, which is the dominant culture. It's all mind control. That's not an exaggeration. I mean, it's literally the truth. All right, let's continue here. Tominoid says, number one, any channel with truth in the name you can rule out. Yes, truth is a red flag. If it's truther, truthy, Mr. Truth, something truth, I'm like, okay, truthers are the opposite of liars. Mainstream media liars versus truthers. And these are just labels. These are labels that don't have any objective meaning to them. It's subjective, belief versus belief. What we're doing here is we're saying, let's move beyond belief systems, wandering around in the darkness with other people who don't know, and let's transition into a operating system, a philosophical framework, a stable philosophical posture. The way skepticism is used today, it's like, oh, I'm skeptical about 9/11. I'm skeptical about Fauci. I'm skeptical about fill in the blank. But that's not good enough, and that's not real skepticism, because they automatically accepted the premise established by the mainstream, by the media, before they became skeptical about certain details. So it's selective skepticism. And when people play devil's advocate, or they're skeptical of you because you're questioning the news, like, oh, you're questioning the news, you got a tinfoil hat. I'm like, well, no, you're actually being skeptical of the skeptic without having been skeptical of the things that you've accepted without any skepticism. And again, there is no internal skepticism within the alt media or mainstream media world. It's the sea of irrelevance that we have been prepared for by Huxley's works. Skepticism light, says Duas Impera. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're only skeptical about certain things and only about their side. So when Pope Elon said, I can't believe some people believe the news, or he said more recently, people who believe legacy media exist in an alt reality. It's like, yeah, that's true, but it's only half true. Alt media is another alt reality. And if you look at my poster here, the real world and the screen world, you'll see that alt media, which includes the woke stuff, is a subset of mainstream. It's not outside of mainstream. It builds on it. That's why I call it MSM plus. And if it's MSM plus, ironically, truthers are deeper into the mind control than the people who believe the lies. Infinite Plane Radio, thanks for calling.
Yeah, hi Tim.
Hey, good to hear from you. What's your name? What's your username, rather?
My name is Dominic. How's it going, bro?
Okay, cool. Thanks for calling in. We have about 20 minutes here. I'm glad we got another caller in. What topic has piqued your interest?
There's no topic. I just want to say hi. Thank you for doing what you're doing. You always have like low, nothing subscribers. I come in and out of the chat sometimes if I'm listening. Say hi or, just say whatever.
Very cool. How
But,
long have you been part of the IPS think tank?
Shit, since the COVID outbreak. So 2020, beginning of January, actually. And you were attacking, this is the time when I was still watching like Brian Staveley videos and stuff like that. And you had another partner, you partnered up, and you did a few videos about Brian Staveley. I remember that, about how fucked he is. Let alone thirst. Throw that in there.
Yeah, okay.
Thirst? Is Thirst here?
Yeah, he's here.
God bless Thirst if Thirst is here from Wisconsin. But I'm just saying hi, and I'm calling in, that's all.
Okay, I appreciate it, and yeah, thanks for the call, and yeah, those are some good times, and these are some important conversations, and
Those are really, really good times. Oh my God, bro, you're so correct.
we'll bring that back.
The feeling, the oh my God, the feeling of life was so amped up if you were on the right side, man.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to me, that's what's coming next. What's coming next is as we media skeptics, auto hoaxers, form a coalition separate from the controlled opposition, things are going to get fun like that again. So I'm glad you're here. And
right, and yeah, as soon as they put us in another happy position, they're going to take it all away again.
Yeah, exactly. And when they do, this is the place where we're going to have level heads. We're not going to be overreacting with the rest of the world. So glad to have you call in. I always like first-time callers. We don't know who's out there always.
Yes,
but...
I'd like to go now, too, just to say goodbye. Thank you so much for taking my call, and it's good to talk to you, bro. First time. Dominic Spiato.
Likewise. All right,
You're
Dominic.
welcome.
Thanks. Call back anytime. We appreciate it. Have a great evening.
All right, I will, with some substance next time. Have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, cool. Someone who joined us back in 2020. Look, whenever they do a big psyop, they do us a favor. I look forward to psyops. That's why I'm like, I want Seattle to get nuked. I want Trump to get his grotesque Antichrist head wound thing. I want this stuff to happen because, some men just want to see the world burn. Wasn't that Joker? Some of us want to see the world stage burn. And this is a construct, the world stage construct. We want to destroy this religion and its God construct. That's what we are aiming to do here. I mean, am I right? Are we not trying to unplug the mind control matrix, even for a minute? Like, they're trying to warn us, we're going to black everything out. It's like, no, we're the ones who are going to do the blackout. That's why I said This isn't just a mind virus. This is that they can stamp out. This is a paradigm shock to the system, and if we do it right, it promises to be very interesting. And that's what I'm interested in here. I'm interested in like taking this as far as we possibly can. In a way, this is an intellectual revolt. Are you not tired of being talked down to, condescended to, treated like you don't see what you see, having your intelligence insulted? Do you get tired of the fact that they're using weaponized superstition to make you into a scared believer instead of a free thinking perceiver who is capable of knowing stuff? Like, I don't need their hoodwink. I don't need to be subject to those who have been shown the light because of some privilege or access or because they drank baby blood. No, that's like, I think that dynamic can go here. And I don't know if it's even something that can be effectively challenged or brought down, but it's interesting to see how far we can go. If you watched Newsbenders, this character is finding out that they write the news in advance. And he's like, the guy who's informing him of how it all works, he's like, look, 99.9% of the population would not understand our conversation. And I could say that about this. 99% of the population wouldn't understand where we're coming from. But that's okay. We're not aiming for the 99%. We're aiming for the ones who've already seen through. But what he said too was, those who can understand it work for us. So in the Newsbenders 30-minute play, you had the brainwashed and the people who did the brainwashing. There was no other group. Nobody outside of the mind control operation had access to the information, to the knowledge about how news was faked. And those who worked in it had implants where they could be killed if they were to breathe a word of it. So here we are with this information in hand, and we didn't go through the usual channels to get that information. You could say we're playing with fire in a sense. We're playing with privileged information, and we're not letting it go, and we're aggregating it, we're assimilating it, and we've codified it into a philosophical approach to media. And they can't fix it. So it's going to be interesting because it's us versus the newsbenders, if you want to look at it that way. The curverts. And it's kind of interesting. We've been talking about curverts for years and the shape of the world, the physical world. But now we're talking about the mental world and the world stage and how they bend the news. So there's a curve going on here. They bend the news, they bend the horizon. And in Leave the World Behind, there's a scene where this character is describing this. He's describing what he calls the curve, about how you can read trends and know what's coming. And I think that's actually about this. Like, we're not the only ones who know about this, but we're the ones who weren't authorized to know about this. Dewis and Paris says, I like that we don't know where it's headed. We observe the path as we create it. Yeah, we are off the grid. I don't care if you're in a bunker in the middle of the woods, with your tinfoil hat, your MREs, your Bibles, your AR-15s, and you have your own chickens, right? You're out there off the grid. You're still on the grid because you're in a defensive crouch in a state of fear because you're a superstitious brainwashee. You're not off the grid. You're not off the grid unless you're off the grid mentally, the world stage. That's where it starts. I'm off the grid. Okay, let's see. We've covered quite a bit. I'm going to get this poster written up. Appreciate the first-time callers, as always, and our regular callers. Harmon, great caller. He put a link in there, so we'll check that out. Always interesting to have talks with people who are bringing these things up around normies, just to see how people react. And Harmon suggested there seems to be some kind of a resurgence in the flat earth topic, and I think there might be something to it. It never went away. It never left. They just managed to kind of put it to the side and kind of bury it a little bit. But the numbers haven't changed. I'm on Twitter. Japan Flat Earth is huge. I love all these various enclaves of Flat Earth, and they're all just taking shots at the bad special effects, and they're laughing about it. They're not cowed by the attempts to be shamed out of seeing what you see. Big Brother, he holds up his hand. He's like, how many fingers am I holding up? He's holding up 4, but you're supposed to say 5 or whatever. And I'm like, you're supposed to deny your senses. You're supposed to go with the screen. Well, the screen tells you you're on a big CGI ball, but your senses don't tell you this. They tell you it's flat and stationary. That's just a fact. Now you can say, well, my senses aren't adequate, so I'm going to go with this. Well, that's fine. But the thing you're going with on the screen is not a pure representation of the world. The screen can no longer be assumed to be a window to the world. You have to understand it's not a window, it's a filter. But the people who don't know it's a filter are the ones who get sucked into the world of belief. This is where it's asked, says, pray for Seattle in the name of Nipsey. Yeah, look, I'm waiting for the big psyops so that we can accelerate this. The more they throw at us, the better. We're immune to it. It's mind war inoculation. Everyone here is, for the most part, mind war inoculated. If the idea of Seattle getting nuked doesn't trigger you, or if me talking about it doesn't make you think, hey, that's cruel, we need to pray for the people of Seattle, pray for Chazistan. If you're understanding where I'm coming from, then you've been inoculated. You're not scared of the scariest thing in the world. You unplugged from that. And to me, that's progress. All right, this is Ball Earth Cult by Chief Crow. We'll be live tomorrow. Sign up for the newsletter to get the archives, and we'll continue this conversation. This is Chief Crow. I'll put a link below, Ball Earth Cult.
Chocolate milk, the holy cow. I wear the Sikhs, tip of the beak on the 33. Charles Manson, ranch dressing, goat heads with the number 9. It is so divine with the holy grail, shape of the snail, the Fibonacci, sound of the conch.